Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at theDove.us. Welcome to Focus Today. I am delighted to have back with us Bryan Fischer. Bryan is one of the guys that's on top of a lot of the issues, and I hold him in high regard for his passion and conviction to stay on top of these things. He's Director of Issues Analysis for American Family Association, and when he's not working hard at his desk, he's at the San Francisco 49ers training camp, making sure that they put their game together for the next season.
Well, you know, we're breaking in the new stadium and all that. We got to be ready to fire on all fronts.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised you haven't got your jersey on, man.
Oh, maybe next time.
Okay, good to see you, Bryan. How you doing, my friend?
Doing fine, Perry. Good to be on with you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, listen, we got a lot to talk about. Let's get into it. It looks like the Senate Democrats want to come after Hobby Lobby with a bill that basically says we can kill the preborn up to the moment of natural birth.
Well, you know, this is just an indication of just how rabid the Democratic Party is about killing unborn babies, because this is a reaction to the ruling that the Supreme Court issued, which upheld the right of Hobby Lobby not to pay for abortion-causing prescriptions for their employees. Now, the truth of the matter is that there are about 20 contraceptives that are available on the market, and Hobby Lobby's healthcare plan provides for their employees to purchase 16 of those 20 contraceptives. The only four that Hobby Lobby objected to are the ones that will terminate a human life in the earliest days right after fertilization, right after conception. But the Democrats apparently are so determined to kill babies in the womb and to compromise the religious convictions of Christian business owners that they actually put together a bill to try to undo the Supreme Court ruling and force every employer, despite their Christian convictions or not, to pay for all so-called contraceptives for their employees. So this really is not even about contraception, because Hobby Lobby supports that for their employees. This is really about the death of unborn children in the womb and the vindictiveness of the Democratic Party to make sure that Christian employers have to pay for that.
All right. So is this also a campaign issue? I mean, this all they got to rally some kind of their liberal female base to make this work?
Well, you know, I think it is, and the fact that Hobby Lobby is not opposed to contraception, they're not opposed to birth control, they're only opposed to medications that terminate human life, and the fact that the liberals are trying to conceal that truth from the public, they're trying to paint Hobby Lobby as some kind of anti-woman business and so forth. You know, and my point of view, Perry, is that the people that are really anti-women here, the people that are engaged in the war on women, are those that are determined to provide abortion under all circumstances at any time for any reason, because half of the babies that are terminated, half of the babies that are killed in the womb, half of those babies are women. So my position, or females. So my position has always been that we ought to have equal rights for unborn women. So we're really the ones that are engaged in the process of trying to protect females at the most vulnerable stage of their existence.
You know, Bryan, another part of this argument has kind of put my brain on tilt. It's always been disguised as women's health. Please tell me where a woman can go in this culture and not get medical services for women's health.
Well, you know, it's absolutely absurd. And, you know, the reality is if a woman's employer does not provide birth control, she can get it for $9 a month at a pharmacy like Walgreens or CVS. It's not difficult to get. It's not expensive, very easy for a woman to get. So, again, this really isn't about women's health. And, you know, we believe that ultimately, you know, my personal belief is a woman has a right to do with her body whatever she wants. But she does not have the right to do with the body of her baby whatever she wants. We're talking about another baby here. We're talking about the body of the baby that she carries, and no human being has a right to do with somebody else's body whatever they want. We believe that that baby and the body of that baby in the womb of the mother needs legal protection.
Now, could this bite the Democrats going into, say, fall election or maybe even 2016? Because it's going to force some of those Democrats to take a position on this.
Yes, and you know, the good news, Perry, is that we were able to rally enough support from our constituents enough good-hearted Americans weighed in that we were actually able to stop this bill in the Senate. That's a part that the media has not spent a lot of time covering. They spent a lot of time talking about the fact that Hobby Lobby was against women, against women's reproductive health, and about this bill that was going to protect women from the evils of Hobby Lobby. But we were able to generate enough support that we were able to stop this bill in the Senate, where it had its best chance of succeeding. We felt that this bill was not going to go anywhere in the House because it's in the hands of pro-life Republicans, but we were able to bottle this thing up in the Senate. Didn't even make it out of Senate, so the Democrats weren't even able to do it. You know, and I say at the end of my program every day, Perry, that we are fighting a winnable war, and here's an example. You know, this was just the people of America rising up, communicating to their senators, we do not want this bill to go through. And one other interesting wrinkle on this, what the Senate was trying to do was to overturn or to revoke a bill that had been passed in 1993, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and the Supreme Court based its ruling on that law. That's the reason they said that Hobby Lobby cannot be forced to buy these contraceptives, these abortifacients, because of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And that was a bill that was sponsored by Chuck Schumer, a Democrat. It passed the Senate 97-3 and was signed into law by Democratic President Bill Clinton. So it was their own bill that gave the Supreme Court the legal ammunition they needed to protect religious liberty for Hobby Lobby.
Interesting. Okay, now just a little bit more on this. Do you think the faith community and other faith-based organizations, whether they're publicly owned or privately owned, will capitalize on this? I mean, we'll jump on this and see it as a win and move forward with it.
Well, I certainly hope so. You know, the Supreme Court has acted in a way that's consistent with the First Amendment. You know, the First Amendment, Perry, protects the free exercise of religion, not just the freedom to believe what you want, not just the freedom to worship God in the way you choose between 11 and noon on Sunday. It protects the free exercise of religion. That applies to Christian businessmen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the Supreme Court, even though they did not base their ruling on the First Amendment, the law that they protected and upheld was based on the First Amendment to protect the free exercise of religion. So we're optimistic and hopeful that there will be Christian businessmen all across America that will take advantage of this and that they will adopt policies in line with their most deeply held religious convictions and protect innocent life in the womb. The Supreme Court's given them the opportunity to do that here.
All right, on another issue, again, our president basically governing through executive order, of which he put into effect the discrimination of LGBT for federal contractors. What's been the backlash on that one?
Well, this is a perfectly horrible executive order. You know, there are all kinds of problems with this that have nothing to do with the issue of homosexuality itself. This is obviously an effort on the part of the president to use the power of his office, the bully pulpit, to bully Americans into providing special sanctions and protections and endorsements for homosexual behavior, which we believe is actually sexually deviant behavior. And by that, we're not using that in a pejorative term. It's just a descriptive term. You know, to deviate means to depart from the plan, to depart from God's design for human sexuality. So we believe that this behavior deviates from God's plan for sexuality, and no Christian businessman who has conscience-driven principles about this should be forced to compromise them in employment. But, you know, there are a couple of other major problems with this. Number one, the Constitution does not give the president any power to establish public policy through executive orders. You know, the first words in the Constitution, Perry, Article 1, Section 1, all legislative power shall be vested in a Congress of the United States. All legislative power. So the only power, the only authority to actually craft public policy rests with the Congress, and every last bit of it rests with the Congress. None of it, zero, zip, nada, zilch, rests with the president. The president has no authority to establish public policy and to create legislation. That's something that Congress alone can do. And Congress rejected the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, and that's what President Obama is working around. The Congress said, no, we are not going to create special workplace protections for people who engage in these non-normative sexual behaviors. And the president said, well, I don't care what you did. I'm going to go around you. I'm going to go around Congress. I'm going to go around the Constitution, and I'm going to do it by executive fiat. He has no constitutional or moral or legal authority to do that.
All right, I want to take a quick break and come back and have you somewhat unpack that for us, because we seem to be in a position now where the president is clearly breaking the law. He is violating the Constitution, and there doesn't seem to be a real serious pushback on this. Maybe you have some reasons as to why not. I mean, a lawsuit? Give me a break. We'll be right back with Bryan Fischer in just a moment. Okay, we're back, and our special guest today is Bryan Fischer. He's the director of the issue analysis for American Family Association. He also has his own television show, or radio, excuse me, and you may want to check out their website. It's an incredible resource, afa.net, and all the things we're talking about, issue papers and everything else, you're going to find there, and support them. They do an excellent job, and Bryan has already shared with us, I believe it's because of their contacts and their ability to get the word out across the nation that this crazy bill in the Senate got thwarted. Bryan, we are in somewhat constitutional crisis. We're certainly in leadership crisis, and the list goes on and on and on. There is an attempt, I guess, to sue the president. I'm not sure how all that works. And then the whole idea of impeachment based upon overusing executive orders or abuse of powers. Now it's being talked about maybe the southern state governors ought to sue the president for violation of his duties on the border and let Congress do their real job and at least impeach him. I don't know if they'll get him thrown out, but an impeachment would at least slow him down for the next 2 years.
Yeah. Well, and you're right about these serious breaches of the Constitution, going back to that LGBT order, that the executive order that the president issued on Monday. Again, it has no foundation in the Constitution whatsoever, because all legislative power belongs to Congress. And as we just talked about in the last segment, the First Amendment protects the free exercise of religion for all people of faith, including in the way they run their business. That's one of the places where they exercise their religious faith. And so the president, in issuing this executive order, has no constitutional authority to do it. He has no legal authority, no moral authority, no ethical authority to do it, but he's done it anyway, and it's a threat to religious freedom. It tramples on the First Amendment. And what he's doing on the border, where he again is deciding not to enforce immigration law. He doesn't have the right to do that. In fact, it's his job to enforce immigration law. That's the job of the executive branch. In our form of government, the Congress passes laws, and it's the responsibility of the executive branch to implement those laws, to enforce those laws. And that's what President Obama has failed to do. In fact, he's changed immigration law on his own by granting amnesty to people that Congress has said we're not going to grant amnesty to. So he's just consistently ignoring the Constitution, ignoring the rule of the law, and going around it. And Jonathan Turley, I don't know if you know who Jonathan Turley is, Perry, but he is a legal professor. He teaches at George Washington University. He's a supporter of Barack Obama. He says ideologically, politically, I agree with all of his positions. I voted for him twice. But he testified before Congress last week, and he says, look, what this president is doing, he is out of control. Those are not his words, those are mine. But Jonathan Turley saying to Congress, look, this president is ignoring the Constitution. He is ignoring the law. He is ignoring the separation of powers. And he said this to Congress: he is on the way of making you completely irrelevant as a body, because he's usurping your authority. And he basically begged Congress, look, you need to do something about this. Now, John Boehner has filed a lawsuit against the president. Whether that's going to go anywhere or not, I really don't know. But the founders, Perry, in their wisdom, they foresaw the possibility that a president or some other member of the executive branch or federal judges would be out of control. They would fail to fulfill their oath of office. Right. The president, his oath of office, he took an office to see that the laws be faithfully executed, to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, and he is consistently refusing to carry out his sworn duty. That's an impeachable offense all by itself. And so, the remedy that the founders provided for a situation like this was the power of impeachment. They said, look, if a president is out of control, there are checks and balances for all the branches of government. The check and balance on the executive branch is the power of impeachment, where the Congress has the constitutional authority. The House would file the articles of impeachment. That's like an indictment. And then the Senate would conduct the trial. If they convict him on the charges, then he would be removed from office. Now, the chances of the president being removed from office, because the Senate's in the hands of Democrats, very slim. But the Republicans at least can exercise their constitutional duty, I believe, and file articles of impeachment against this president. I believe they've got a solemn duty to do it. It's in their power to file articles of impeachment, and I believe they should do it. This lawsuit's unlikely to go anywhere, but at least if they file articles of impeachment, it surfaces the issue. The public debate is all about it. It could be sent to the Senate for trial, and then the Senate would have to answer for the fact that they are allowing this president to violate the Constitution at will with impunity.
Wow, that's well said, Bryan, because sometimes I guess we're waiting to see if there's a turnover after this November where you'd have at least like-minded people that would force this. But with all due respect to him as a person, and certainly to the position of the presidency, it appears right now we got a leadership that is anti-God and anti-America.
Well, you know, one of the alarming things, and here's another thing, Perry, that people need to understand. What we are dealing with here is something that is unprecedented in American history. And this is what Jonathan Turley was trying to tell Congress. Look, we've never had a president that has arrogated to himself this kind of what really amounts to tyrannical and dictatorial authority, where he just disregards the Constitution, disregards the law, and just does whatever he wants. He's sort of governing by executive fiat. Well, that's what they do in banana republics. That's what they do in third world countries. And Jonathan Turley trying to get the attention of Congress. Look, this is not how things are designed to operate in America. And you look at these executive orders, and you really have, I think, not only an anti-God, but an anti-Christian energy and animus that seems to be driving this president. He fawns over Islam all the time. He's a proponent of Islam. He says wonderful things about Islam. He has Ramadan dinners in the White House, very glitzy, talks about all of the contributions of Islam to American history, of which there are none. I mean, he's never cited a specific example, but never ever says anything kind about the influence of Christianity on the world or on American history. So there seems to be an anti-Christian bias, an anti-religious liberty bias in this president. And, you know, it's alarming to think that unless something is done, we've got another 2.5 years of being governed by a president who is fundamentally lawless.
All right. What are the Christians to do, Bryan? What are you telling your listeners? I mean, you hear the same calls I do. They're frustrated. They don't know what to do. Is this a turn the other cheek moment? Is this a trowel in one hand and a saber in the other hand moment? What do we do?
Yeah. Well, you know, I think obviously we must be people of prayer. You know, we know from what Jesus taught us that prayer can move mountains, that in faith we can say to this mountain, be lifted up and cast into the sea, and it will be done. So even the things that look to us like impossibilities, like seeing kind of changes in the executive office, the Oval Office that we want to see, it may seem impossible to us, but we know that nothing is impossible with God. So we must continue to pray. We must continue to believe. When we see things that happen around us, Perry, that we don't like, we need to use that as kind of a prompt to intercessory prayer. God, please help us. God, please save us. God, please protect us. And then, frankly, Perry, I think we just need to keep pestering our members of Congress. We just need to wear them out with our complaints about what they are allowing this president to get away with. And who cares if they get irritated? I mean, they're the ones that have the capacity to do something about it, and we need to pester them until they do.
Why do you think John Boehner is dragging his feet on challenging the president on his seemingly breach of duty here?
You know, I really don't know it. I don't know exactly why. I do think one thing, Perry, is that even John Boehner has never seen anything like this in his life. And I think sometimes Republicans are just kind of slow to wake up and realize the enormity of what's being done right under their noses. I think there's sort of a complacency and sort of a sleepiness about some of this. They don't seem to understand the urgency of the situation. You know, I also think, talking about the border, for instance,
yeah, right.
the Republicans are just as bad on the border as this administration. I mean, it's Republicans that are talking about amnesty and open borders and all of that. But the reason for that is very simple. The Chamber of Commerce has promised the Republican Party $50 million for their election campaigns if they will support and pass amnesty legislation. So John Boehner is getting all of this money dangled in front of him and the Republicans by the Chamber of Commerce. So they basically sold their souls on immigration policy for what the scripture calls, the King James calls, filthy lucre. Because Chamber of Commerce, they speak for businesses that want cheap labor. And so they've said to the Republican Party, we don't care about the Constitution. We don't care about what's best for America. We don't care about what's best for our culture. We just care about getting cheap labor. And we'll give you $50 million if you will sell your principles out in order to promote amnesty. So that's part of what causes this sleepiness and indifference and irresponsibility on the part of Republicans.
There is a humanitarian crisis now at the border. It's not only taking care of these young people coming across. What do we do as human beings and Christians? At the same time, part of that humanitarian crisis is they've been separated from their family. It seems like the most Christian thing we could do is get them back home with their families.
Well, absolutely, Perry. You are exactly right. The most humanitarian thing we can do is, number one, to seal up that border so children are not tempted to make this dangerous, dangerous journey. Children are dying on this journey. They're finding the bodies of young children washing up on the banks of the Rio Grande. We have heard reliable reports that as many as a third of the young girls who make this trip are sexually abused or molested on the journey. And so the most humanitarian thing we can do is seal up that border so they're not tempted to try this very dangerous thing. And then the second thing, Perry, look, these children are separated from their parents. The most humanitarian thing we can do is get these children reunited with their families, reunited with their parents. That's where they belong.
You saw where maybe he wants to be president, but Governor Perry is sending the National Guard down there. Now you got a state doing a federal job. Are we heading into another constitutional crisis with this move?
Well, there really should not be a constitutional crisis here, Perry, and I'll tell you why. In fact, I wrote a column about it today. The Second Amendment says that a well-regulated militia is necessary for the security of a free state. Uses the word state, as in the state of Texas. And the reason that the founders in the Second Amendment, again, this was after they had provided in the Constitution for a standing army. This is 2 years later. They say, hey, one hole we make sure we need to plug here is we need to make sure that states understand they have the right to protect their own borders. So Governor Perry, should not be a constitutional crisis. Governor Perry has the authority as the commander-in-chief of the National Guard, the militia of the state of Texas, to deploy them to the border to protect the security of the state of Texas. Now, it's a shame that the federal government is not doing it for them, but Texas and Governor Perry, they do have the constitutional authority to protect their border using military means to do it.
That's an incredible take. I never considered that. Thanks. I think you opened up our eyes on that because I think he's doing a thing. You know, what happens if he's successful? I mean, what happens? What's Louisiana going to do? What's New Mexico going to do? And is Governor Brewer going to get involved in this?
Well, you've got Governor Brewer is very upset with the administration for what they've done at the border. The governor of New Mexico, Susana Martinez, she is a conservative. Bobby Jindal in Louisiana, conservative Republican. So they could be emboldened by Governor Perry. Well, he could wind up being President Perry because of this virtually, but they could be emboldened by his example, recognize that they are the commanders-in-chief of their National Guard, and they can do something about this constitutionally. That's the reason for militia, according to the Founding Fathers' Second Amendment, to protect the security of a free state. They can do it.
Wow. Bryan, you're an inspiration. This is great stuff. What are you guys working on? What are some of the things you got your eye on?
Well, this is pretty alarming. Just to drop this, we're going to send an action alert out on this later in the week. But there's a cable network called it's the Cartoon Network. Actually, they've got a segment of late night programming called Adult Swim. A lot of it's animated stuff, but they are preparing to roll out a new program entitled The Black Jesus. This is a ghetto Jesus. This is the Jesus that uses profanity. This is the Jesus that drinks, gets drunk. This is the Jesus that hands out bottles of booze to people in the hood. It's incredibly offensive program. So we're going to try to appeal to Time Warner, which owns this cable network, appeal to Time Warner not to put this thing on the air. So people go to our website at afa.net. They can sign up for the action alerts, and we'll keep them apprised of what's going on with this new horribly offensive program.
All right, afa.net, do that. Bryan, thanks, my friend. I consider our time together to be precious, and I know you're busy. You got a lot going on preparing for your shows and doing all your writing. Thanks for your time today, and let's stay in touch, okay?
You bet, Perry. It's always an honor and a delight for me to be with you. Thank you.
All right, God bless. We'll be right back.